Great. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on compensation trends and strategies in 2022. My name is Tara Manco, and I'm the marketing manager here at PROXUS. On behalf of myself and the entire team here, I want to take a moment to thank you for taking the time out of your morning to join us for today's program. In a few minutes, I will hand the program over to my colleague, Jim Jeffers, who is the sales account manager here at PROXUS. And he'll walk through, give you a brief overview of what we do here at PROXUS, run through today's agenda, and introduce Dennis Shrenk, who is our compensation practice director and who will be leading the conversation with you today. Before I do that, though, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items. First and foremost, today's program will be recorded. We will send the recording as well as the slide deck out to all of today's attendees. Secondly, if you have a question during the program, you can submit it through the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. We'll be taking those questions as we go along, and we'll answer them during the Q&A session at the end of the program. Similarly, if you want to submit a comment, you can do so through the chat button on the bottom of your screen, and we'll collect those as we go along as well. Finally, the information being presented today is for educational purposes and should not be considered legal advice. So that's it for housekeeping. At this point, I want to hand the program over to Jim, who's going to run through our agenda and introduce our speaker.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Tara mentioned, I am Jim Jeffers, the account manager for PROXUS. I help organizations new to PROXUS navigate their human resources and discuss areas we can partner to create a positive impact on their businesses and employees. At PROXUS, we appreciate feedback from all of you. And if there is any HR related topics you would like to see in an upcoming webinar, please do not hesitate to let us know. For the agenda, Dennis is going to tackle a few areas that have impacted businesses over the past year. The war on talent, attracting new candidates, the great resignation, and how to retain existing employees throughout that. Recent market shifts and how your organization can adapt, and any legal and social considerations. So with that being said, our featured speaker is Dennis Shrenk. He is the compensation director of the PROXUS HR compensation firm. His resume speaks for itself right here. And with that being said, I'm going to kick it over to Dennis and let him navigate you through the next 30 minutes or so. Any questions, please don't hesitate to shoot them up on the Q&A board, and we will go through them at the end of this. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jim, and good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Dennis Shrenk, and I am the compensation practice director here at PROXUS, and we help companies and our clients navigate the world of pay and all of the issues that compensation and market pricing and employee pay and employee fairness, all those issues that surround that. So I want to talk a little bit today about some of the trends that we're seeing in 2022 and talk through the issues and hopefully some solutions and some ideas that will be helpful and that you can implement at your company to kind of get through this very unique time when it comes to compensation. As Jim and Tara mentioned, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we're going to try to save about 15 minutes or so at the end, and hopefully we'll be able to get to some of those good questions. All right. The war on talent, and I don't think this is news really to anybody in terms of the challenges that companies are having around recruiting. There just isn't folks available, right? There just isn't the same amount of employees out there as a pool. And it's interesting because, we're not just seeing it, from entry level jobs. We're seeing it across all levels of jobs, from entry level to middle management, white collar, blue collar, and all industries as well. And a lot of that is due to the business environments and how things have so rapidly changed during COVID, as we are kind of hopefully coming out of the effects of the pandemic, and as companies are ramping up hiring and everyone is ramping up at the same time, it just puts more and more pressure on that labor pool. And there just is a real skills gap and talent shortage out there. There just aren't folks with the required skills and talents that companies are currently looking for. And I know particularly in healthcare, where you've had, schools that were, say, training CNAs, certified nursing assistants, had to shut down during the pandemic. So that's, exacerbated this lack of skills and talent. Another thing that we've seen with the pandemic is sort of these labor market dropouts, right? There's folks that might have, been furloughed or lost their job during the pandemic and are just not interested in going back to work. They're not even looking for jobs that sort of dropped out of the labor market. Maybe they're towards the end of their career arc. And that kind of gets into, changing demographics as, baby boomers, was the largest employee cohort, becomes smaller and smaller. More folks are, retiring, and there just aren't enough folks with, coming up through the ranks to replace those that are retiring. And also, and I think a lot of you have experienced this, that one of the biggest recruiting challenges is just because there's such a war on talent, because there are so many jobs out there that are available, candidates really feel like they have the upper hand, and they are feeling more empowered to negotiate for salary, negotiate for incentive, negotiate for fringe benefits than they ever were before. Another thing that factors into that is also some of the societal and social changes that we've experienced. And we'll talk a little bit about this later, where it's just this feeling of empowerment that people have, that they don't have to take that first offer from the employer, that they do feel that confidence to be able to negotiate. What are, some of the solutions, some of the things that employers can do to attract candidates? And one of these is to offer remote work flexibility. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the next slide. Another option is sign-on bonuses, retention bonuses. And this is something that I've really been encouraging my clients to think about, to go to a sign-on or a retention bonus. Let's say you might have a sign-on bonus when they first are hired, and then if they stay 6 months, an additional bonus, and then they stay a year, an additional bonus. So I like to stagger it there a little bit. Instead of just giving it all up front as a sign-on, I think it's helpful to have that retention component in there, that you can at least guarantee a year or so of continuous employment from hire with bonus payout. And another advantage of these bonuses are you're not getting into internal equity issues when it comes to pay with your existing folks. So what a lot of my clients are experiencing is, to attract candidates and get them in the door, they've had to offer base salaries higher than they normally would have done in the past. So what's that is doing is that now folks are coming on board at a rate that maybe is as high as someone with 10 years of experience at that company. Or maybe they're a rate that's even higher than all of their peers. And, that can cause a lot of problems, when it comes to internal equity. So not only do you have to think about that cost that you have with that employee's high salary, and how it will compound with merit increases, maybe over time during the life cycle of that employee. But you also now have perhaps a cost to bring all of your existing employees that are in that same role up to a comparable rate. So the more that you can attract folks with a sign-on bonus or a retention bonus, the less likely you are to get into those internal equity issues. Another thing to think about is developing maybe wider pay ranges for your hard to fill positions. So for you folks that do have a compensation structure with minimums, midpoints, and maximums, for your hard to fill positions, you might want to widen that spread between minimum and maximum. So maybe instead of a 40 or 50%, maybe you go to 60%. Just to give yourself a little bit more of flexibility when you're looking to hire, and not, blowing up your compensation structure or hiring someone above max. And we'll talk a little bit more about salary structures in some later slides. Another option is to, look beyond base pay to total compensation. Have employees think about, what are the benefits that can be offered? What is the paid time off, the vacation? Does your company offer paternity leave? Are you marketing that to new hires? So to get employees to think about the bigger picture. If you do total compensation statements for your employees that show the value, not just of their base pay, but of all their different benefits, are you able to take that total compensation and maybe just do a generic mock-up for a couple of your real hard to fill positions that you could actually share with a candidate, not early on in the recruiting process, but more when you're trying to really land them, when you have an offer out, showing them, on paper, the value of the total compensation proposition that your company offers can be really, really valuable. So we have recruiting pressure, but we also have, the Great Resignation. And the best way to address the Great Resignation is keep the folks that you have. Keep the people that you already have on your staff. Put a lot of focus on retention, because this is throughout this year is going to continue to be a big issue for companies. Turnover rates of 20% can be expected on many industries, and that's just voluntary turnover. Think about what it costs to replace an employee. It typically takes 33% of a worker's annual salary to replace them. Not to mention the time, the effort, the sweat that you've put in training new employees, and to have them go to another employer. They've taken that time, that effort that you've put in to training them, and then now another company is getting the benefit of that. Most employees that will leave your company have less than 5 years of experience. So those are the folks that you are investing that time in training. And keep in mind that most of the employees that leave are leaving because they perceive or actually are below market in terms of pay. So it's, we often think about retaining our high performers, retaining our long tenured employees, and we should, and that's important. But we also really want to make sure that we're focused on our employees that have less than 5 years experience, that might not be up to the market rate for their position. So in addition to putting in that training, make sure that you're giving them regular increases to get them up to that market rate as soon as their performance and on the job warrants, so you're less likely to lose them. Bringing them in at a competitive rate, for their year's experience, but then, having them languish at, 1-2% or so increases every year, that's not going to get them up to market. So you really got to make sure that you're paying attention to those folks. And you wanna motivate them. You want to motivate your people to encourage them to stay and to continue to work hard for your organization. So explore variable compensation, particularly for your top performers, that are already well compensated in terms of base, are already above the going market rate for their job, which is fine. Doesn't mean that they're overpaid. They're at a rate that reflects their high performance and their years of experience. But at some point, you want to, not allow those base increases to continue to compound. So exploring sort of variable comp options, be it bonuses, a variety of different incentives. Tuition reimbursement can be an extremely valuable tool to not only attract candidates, but retain them. Something as simple as gift certificates, something as simple as say, going to Wawa and getting, and they have this programs available where you can get boxes of $20, Wawa gift cards, like who doesn't like that, and it's a small outlay of money, but it can go a long way in terms of employee goodwill. And also, when you think about motivating your folks, thinking about pay for performance and thinking about, what are your salary increase budgets? What is your merit increase budget for 2022? And they're going to average around 3.94%, which is the highest growth that we've seen since 2008. I have a lot of clients asking me, what should their merit budgets be? What should they be budgeting for increases in 2022? And I tell them as much as you can spend. I mean, honestly, the market is moving that fast, and there is such pressure on employers to, attract folks, retain folks. 3.9%. I mean, to me, honestly, seems a little conservative. I mean, whatever you can do to get as much dollars into an increased budget, be it if it's across the board or if it's merit or whatever it is, I would certainly recommend doing so. Another option that you have to not only motivate your folks but attract candidates is to explore, flexibility and remote work. And that's really been a hot topic with the pandemic when, we were forced, people were forced to work remotely. And it's now estimated by 2025, 22%, almost a quarter of the workforce will be working, completely remotely. And it's increasingly the expectation of folks, so about almost 75% of professionals are expecting, remote work in some form, be it full-time or a hybrid model, really to be the standard. Because employees have experienced it. We've all experienced it, where people were forced to work from home, but were still able to maintain productivity and get their jobs done and leverage technology. So it's really become the expectation, and almost, all employees really aren't looking to return to the office full time. So, think about what options you have. Is it a day a week? Is it, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday that they can work from home? Is it fully remote, fully virtual? I think there's a variety of different approaches that employers can explore. One thing that I like, and I see this with a lot of my clients, is sort of like a hybrid model where you might have an A group of employees and a B group of employees. And 1 week, the A group is working Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then the B group is working Tuesday and Thursday. And then the following week, it switches. So the A group's Tuesday and Thursday, and the B group is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So there's a lot of different ways that you can leverage remote work and flexibility in terms of scheduling to meet your business objectives, but also be attractive to employees. But it does raise a number of different issues when it comes to compensation. And I've had to work through this with a couple of my clients. So if you have a remote job, if you are posting a job and let's say it's fully remote, and the employee you could hire that employee anywhere in the country. Like, how do you post that salary range? That it's a little bit of a conundrum. Do you use a United States average? Do you use what you've done historically? My recommendation is kind of looking at the market data, looking at what a general US average is, making the range as broad as you can to account for a candidate in Brooklyn, as well as a candidate in Erie, Pennsylvania, for instance. So it really raises some questions. And also, when you think about your existing folks, how are we going to market price jobs? Before we were used to market pricing, based on, obviously the industry, the size of the company, and maybe most importantly, the location. And typically the location was where the offices was located. But now when you have folks that can work from home and anywhere in the country, where do you market price them? Do you still market price it at the business location? Do you market price them from where their home location is? It's become, really interesting, particularly with a lot of the Silicon Valley jobs where when the pandemic hit, a lot of those, IT developers, professionals decamped to, Boise, Idaho, but still had their, San Francisco type salaries, so is that fair? I have a good friend of mine who was working in Boston and now is living in North Carolina, working remotely, still being paid at his Boston rate. Is that fair? Is that fair to still the folks that are working from home, but still living in the Boston area where their dollar doesn't go as far as someone that's in North Carolina or somewhere else where the cost of living is lower? So these are really tricky issues that, as employers and myself as a compensation professional are really have to work through, because it is, and gets back to, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, gets into internal equity. If you have two people doing the same amount of work and one individual is in Brooklyn and the other individual is in Idaho, and they're doing the exact same thing, getting paid exactly the same in terms of absolute dollar figure, are they being paid the same when the Brooklyn cost of living is so much higher than Idaho? So these are the sort of things that, as compensation professionals, we're really given a lot of thought to. We'll talk a little bit about sort of what we're seeing in the market, some of the recent shifts, and a lot of what we're seeing in terms of pressure in the market is coming from changes in minimum wage, and that comes back to a greater social focus, a greater societal focus on compensation, and at what point is compensation fair? What is a living wage? What is not a living wage? So there is increasing pressure on states to adjust their minimum wages, and with the end goal of getting to $15 an hour. And I think all states will get to that point eventually. It's just sort of a matter of how fast. Delaware, here in the great state of Delaware, where I'm located, recently, effective January 1st, we moved up to $10.50 an hour, going up to $11.75 next year, with the goal of getting to $15 an hour. Same with Maryland, recent increases, and again, an increase next year. New Jersey, $13, going to $14 next year in 2023, very aggressively moving to that $15 minimum. New York State, New York City, Long Island, Westchester County are already at $15. The remainder of New York State is currently at $13.20, and then they will publish where they'll be in 2023 later this year. They have a factor that they use based on cost of living, but the goal is to get the remainder of that state to $15 an hour. I'm going to skip Pennsylvania, go to Virginia, also currently 11, going to $12 next year. Pennsylvania is still at the federal minimum of $7.25, and that's just simply not going to remain. I mean, I expect, and there's already bills within the legislature to look at their minimum wage and get that up to a rate and a plan to get them to $15. So it's just not, you can't have all these states that are surrounding Pennsylvania be at such an aggressive minimum wage and not have them keeping up. So I expect a lot of activity with the Pennsylvania minimum wage this year. One of the things that we're seeing with the minimum wage is, we're used to increases every couple years, right? We're not used to this pace of just every year we're seeing an increase. And that's a lot of challenges on employers and challenges on us as compensation professionals. And, we know what the increases are going to be for the most part in most states next year. So begin modeling your costs now, begin making sure that you have budgeted dollars to bring your folks into compliance come January 1st, 2023. We have to get used to this year-to-year pace. It is the new normal for now until we get to $15 an hour. So it's something, if you can be proactive, and I've recommended this to clients as well, not just bringing people up to the minimum wage now, but looking a year ahead and bringing them up now in anticipation. I think it's just going to make it easier. But all these sort of, well-intentioned things that our legislatures are doing do have, concerns and do have issues that we run into. One thing is compression, so you might have had, jobs that started at $9 an hour and jobs that started at $11 and jobs that started at $11.50, based on the market or the value that job had to your organization. And you had differentiation based on pay. But now everybody's at $12. No matter what level of work they're doing, if they're in an entry-level job, they're all at least $12. So you're getting these sort of compression issues that we've never seen before. We're also, it kind of wipes out any sort of work that you've done around internal equity, where you've given folks, let's say, increases based on their performance or their years of experience. You've got a nice range of pay and differentiation for your entry-level folks. And then poof, all of that's gone by the wayside because everybody's got to be now at $13 an hour. So what I've done is, and worked with clients in ways to try to preserve internal equity, try to bring people up to the minimum wage, but also preserve some of those differentials based on pay for some of your entry level positions. And that can increase your cost. I do know that you have to be a little bit careful. You don't want it to sort of cascade all the way up through the organization, preserving these internal equity differences. At some point, at some level of pay, you have to call the play dead. So you're not completely breaking the bank, but if you have an opportunity to preserve all that hard work that you've done to, excuse me, to differentiate based on years of experience or merit, don't let that work go by the wayside. Try to preserve that if you can. Cost for employees, overall fixed cost are very likely to increase. And I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. And I would assume that it's going to increase a lot as inflation continues to increase, as merit budgets continue to increase. The Social Security COLA this year will be 5.9%, which is one of the highest it's been that I can remember. So that just overall is going to put greater pressure from an inflationary standpoint, and cost of living in general for all employers. And it's tough. It's like how can you gather information on the state of the labor market when things are just moving so fast? As fast as I've seen it in my 20 years of working in compensation. So you gotta, when things move fast, you gotta make sure that you're responsive, and you have to make sure that your compensation structure is responsive as well. And the way that you do that is you market price your jobs, you market price your jobs, you market price your jobs. And it's time to think about, instead of doing it once a year, maybe you do it twice a year. I know a lot of surveys just run on a yearly basis. There are some that do update quarterly, which is the ERI survey, which is what we use at PROXUS. I know that back in my in-house days, when I did work in the healthcare industry, and there was a tremendous shortage of nurses, we had to market price and our nurses twice a year, because they were such a hot job. So if you have jobs that are important to your business, that you're having difficulty recruiting, think about not just looking at it once a year, looking at them twice a year. And just focus on your core benchmark jobs. Don't feel like you have to benchmark every single one of your jobs. And that's what I do with my clients. When we do this sort of annual benchmarking, we focus on those core jobs that have the majority of your employees, that are key to your business, that are, building the widget, providing that key service. And focus in on those jobs, and then make sure that they're competitive. And then if you have a good salary structure in place that's attuned to the market, you can use the market data that you gather with those key benchmark jobs and use that to extrapolate to your wider employee population. Another thing that you can do is, in addition to getting good objective market data, through working with, a consultant, or maybe you purchase your own surveys, or however you get the data, but trying to augment that as well with, recruiters, with your hiring managers, bringing, your recruiting team into the compensation decision-making process can be really valuable, because those recruiters are getting that real-time data. They know what offers are not working, what they're being countered at. So trying to move beyond just getting that anecdotal sort of, information, and creating spreadsheets, creating logs, tracking what your recruiters are seeing, tracking what your offers are, what they were, countered at, getting that in a spreadsheet or whatever format that you can, report on it, start seeing trends, start getting that real-time data. and making it actionable for your company. So to keep your salary and your compensation structure responsive, you have to have a structure in place to do that. And I always recommend, my clients to, put the time in and put in a salary grade structure. And all salary grades are a hierarchy grouping of assigned salary ranges, a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum that you would want to pay for a job. And it's just a hierarchy, and that hierarchy can be responsive both to internal and external equity. It can be responsive to the external equity. And what I mean by that is the market, right? Is the going market rate for a job. But it can also be responsive internally, how you look at your jobs and how you value jobs and how you see career progressions within your company is really important too. So I know when I work with my clients, it's getting the market data, it's building a structure based on that market data, responsive to that market data, but also being respectful of and informed by that internal structure as well. You really want your midpoint to be anchored to your market target, to have a true market-based structure. And the market target can vary based on company. It can be vary based on job family. It can vary based on job. You just want to make sure that you're picking something and you're being consistent. A lot of folks like to be competitive at the 50th percentile. And that's sort of the median, the middle of the market. Doesn't mean everybody's going to be paid at that rate. You're going to have folks that are going below the 50th that, don't have a lot of years experience. You got people that are above the 50th percentile that have, many years experience, are high performers. But the target, the overall target, what your structure is targeting is that 50th percentile. In a market like this, with things moving as quickly as they are, you're seeing companies now be a little bit more aggressive. Maybe are targeting now a 75th percentile because they don't want to get into having to counteroffer an employee or a candidate, right? They're going to come in with a very aggressive salary. It's anchored at the 75th percentile. And either the employee is going to accept it or not, and I don't have to worry about getting into a counter offer sort of situation. You could target the 75th percentile for all of your jobs, or maybe just some of your jobs. And that's kind of the neat thing about that I like about compensation is that creative aspect, that kind of doing different things for different jobs and different companies as appropriate. Maybe your target is somewhere between the 50th and the 75th. Maybe it's the 62nd and a half, whatever it is. There's also ways to lead and lag the market as well. So when you think about and you're going out and you're getting market data, what is the effective date of the data? Is it now? Is it February 1st? That you're getting data, or do you want to look to some point in the future? Maybe you want to have that data to be aged, to be increased a little bit to reflect what the market will be July 1st of this year or January 1st of next year. So you can think about, different approaches. Some companies will want to just lead the market. So they might pick an effective date of January 1st of next year, because they want to lead the market this entire year. Most employers and a lot of my clients, what I recommend is kind of leading and lagging the market. So kind of pick, say the middle of the year, July 1st, or, whatever the middle of your planning year is. You're sort of leading the market the first half of the year and lagging it the latter part of the year. So as we kind of wrap up here, I want to talk a little bit about some of the legal and social concerns that we're seeing around compensation. One, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this, many states and municipalities are now prohibiting employers asking applicants for salary history. And I think that that's a good thing. And that's to sort of eliminate, bias that and prior discrimination that an applicant might bring to a new job. And honestly, what I've been recommending clients, even if your state or city or wherever, even if you're still allowed to ask salary history, just do best practices and don't ask, and you really don't need to. If you are confident in your salary structure, if you're confident that you have good market data, if you have all this confidence in what you've built in terms of your compensation at your company, why do you have to ask the history? It shouldn't matter. It should be what should matter is the range that you've established for the job. What should matter is the existing pay structure that you have for this person's peers. That's what's important. So whether it's prohibited or not, do not ask for salary history. Another thing that's been an interesting development that's happened recently, where a couple of states, Rhode Island and Nevada, required employers not only to not ask salary history, but also actually disclose salary ranges. Colorado, Connecticut's looking at this. I expect other states to begin looking at this as well. And this is a really interesting development. And it's really now more than ever making it incumbent on employers to get market data to have a compensation structure in place. Because if you're required to share a range, you have to have a range in place to do so, right? So really the pressure is on employers to get good market data, objective market data, and develop ranges. Increasing number of laws are now across the country prohibiting pay discrimination. You have federal law that, prohibits pay discrimination based on gender. And then you have a number of state laws that are even more aggressive. In particular, New Jersey, where it's not just gender, but every type of protected class. You have to look at and make sure that you're not running afoul with pay discrimination for that class. So it's really becoming, more so than ever before to the forefront. And again, and I can't stress this is not just gender, not just race, but disability status, veteran status, age status, thinking about all of these different protected classes. And how do you know, if you have a problem? And this was sort of the topic for a webinar that I did last year around, just about pay equity. And I can easily do another webinar just about pay equity. It's just such an important topic. It's not enough to kind of just anecdotally think you're okay, or just look at a spreadsheet and say, it looks good. You got to do the work, and the work is doing a statistical analysis to make sure that you are paying your folks fairly and understanding where your problems may be. And sometimes it's okay to pay one group higher, say on average, than another group. Some pay differences are okay. And these are some of the differences, if they're doing, substantially different work, if you're making accommodations for an injured or disabled employee, if you have and pay different for different ability or experience or education levels. And not just saying that you pay for different education levels, having it documented within the job description. That's important. You can't pay someone demonstrably more than another person because that person has a master's degree and the other person has a bachelor's degree, but on the job description, the minimum requirement is just a high school education, right? So there has to be a reason for it. It has to be documented. Same thing with merit. You have to have a bona fide merit program and process in place. Seniority, incentive, all these things are okay to have pay differences. If you can explain a difference in pay based on one of these differences, you have a problem. But again, it's doing the work and the analysis to see where the problems are first. And it's not just looking at job title. It's really looking at comparable work, particularly at the state law level, particularly again in New Jersey, where people got different titles and doing slightly different things, but if really what they're doing is very comparable, it requires similar skills, has similar responsibilities and effort, similar working conditions, we're all working in an office, that would all be considered one group of employees, one cohort that you would need to be worried about that you're paying fairly within that cohort. And it extends across departments and units within a business. So when I think about, comparable work, job titles is one way to look at it, but it's the most narrow. So you want to broaden it out maybe to your job families, to your EEO categories is another way to kind of get at comparable work. And another approach is to, other basis of comparison, grouping, looking at people with similar duties, similar skills, and then grouping them in your own sort of cohorts and groups. So I went a little bit over, but still want to leave some time for questions. But I do want to thank everybody for taking the time today, and I hope you got something out of this webinar. There'll be certainly feel free to reach out to me or to Jim. A lot of the issues and concerns and problems that I've been talking about today, these are the things that we help our clients with and help them think through. And hopefully take a little bit off of their plate. So that's going to wrap it up for me. And again, thank you. And I'll see if we got any questions.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, we have a couple questions. If anyone has a question, they want to throw it in the Q&A or the chat. So I'll start with the first question that was posted, Dennis. Surrounding hiring bonuses or retention pay. It's what is the best way to determine how much to pay a hire or retention bonus for a particular position? Is it typically a percentage of base pay or a flat amount?
I would typically do a flat amount. I wouldn't do it. It's not a performance-based bonus or a variable pay type thing where you would look at percentage of pay. It's more something that should be handled by a flat amount, a flat dollar figure. And again, if you can kind of stagger it, again, not giving that full flat amount up front, but say, okay, we'll give you 50% of that flat amount, and the other 50% when you can complete 6 months of service or a year of service, whatever it is. And then another thing that you can think about doing is, you can have different flat amounts for different jobs based on how much difficulty you're having within the market attracting folks. But that's a good question.
Okay, and the next one is surrounding nonprofit organizations. So what are you seeing for nonprofit organizations regarding the 3.9% salary increase for 2022?
It sort of depends on the nonprofit sometimes. There's there's nonprofits, and then there's the, let's say, the large health system nonprofit with 10,000 employees. But I would say for most nonprofits, maybe not as aggressive at the 3.9, but I would certainly be thinking as close to 3 as you can get. I think nonprofits are experiencing the same pressures that the for-profits are. And you need to kind of, sometimes there's going to be a difference between the market in which you compete with services and the market that you compete for talent, right? So as a nonprofit, you exist in that space and that's your industry, but your market for talent could be for-profits and nonprofits. So you have to be wary of that. The one thing with nonprofits, and I have some clients that do this, is, and I talked a little bit about this, about, total compensation, thinking about, what is the total value proposition? And for nonprofits that are very mission-based and mission-focused, making that a sell for a candidate can be important as well.
Great. We had another one pop up. How important are benefits? For example, employer costs for medical, dental, vision, insurance, retirement plan contributions, PTO, et cetera, in this competitive environment. Are applicants even considering this in their decision to select one organization over another?
I don't think employees are looking at benefits as much as they do base pay, but they never really have. And it also sort of depends on the candidate, right? So the younger me had a lot. I did not care about benefits. The older me, with married with 2 kids, does care about benefits. So it can very much be dependent on the candidate. I don't think employees, are focusing as much on benefits as they should, because I don't think that employers are making the sell as well as they can when it comes to benefits, to really figure out, what are, and again, there's market data available, not as good as pay data, but, there is market data around benefits that, if you are above average in the amount of vacation that you have, make that a selling point to your candidate, and, again, my point around total comp, if you're giving total comp statements to your employees, take one, make it generic, use it to, as part of your pitch to a new hire. So, a candidate will pay attention to benefits as much as you make it part of your pitch.
Great. And that's the, any other questions? Nope. That's the last of the questions. I'm going to kick it to Tara to kind of wrap things up.
Great. Thank you, Jim. And thank you, Dennis. Again, on behalf of everyone at PROXUS, I want to thank you all our attendees for taking the time out of your morning to join us. And thank you, Dennis, for sharing your insights with everyone. As I mentioned before, you can expect to receive an email from PROXUS with a link to the recording as well as the presentation and some additional helpful information. After the program is over, you should see a survey pop up on your screen. If you could take a few minutes to give us your feedback, we would greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't done so already, please feel free to visit and follow us on LinkedIn. As the year goes on, we'll be hosting additional webinars, so you can follow along with us on LinkedIn. With that, and on behalf of everyone at PROXUS, thank you again for your time, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.